Welcome to Revenge Report. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let's dive in. The sun was brutal that morning, already cooking the desert compound by the time I stepped out of the Jeep. Dust stuck to my boots as I crossed the gravel toward the crowd gathering near the command tent. Tan uniforms, faded red helmets, the familiar sharp smell of scorched brush. It was a wildfire command exercise, all right. Elite, invitation only, the kind of drill where legends show up. I wasn't supposed to be nervous. I'd flown in from Colorado that morning. I had 2 satellite briefings waiting in my inbox, a hardened field jacket over my shoulder, and scars that still itched when the wind changed. But still, my stomach turned when I saw him, Chief Robert Vale. He stood near the gear racks, surrounded by half a dozen men laughing about something. His hair was more gray than I remembered, but the stance was still the same, hands behind his back, like he owned the earth under his feet. When his eyes scanned across me, there wasn't even a flicker of recognition. That stung more than I expected. A man with mirrored sunglasses nudged his buddy, nodded toward me, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Looks like we've got a tourist. You lose your yoga class, sweetheart." They all chuckled. My father didn't. He just looked at me and said, flat and cool, "This isn't the right place for civilians." I didn't respond. I walked past them toward the equipment racks. My pulse was pounding, but my face didn't show it. I reached for the oldest, most battered fire axe I could find, the kind real crews avoid because it's all weight and no balance. The laughter quieted a little as I took it down. "Hey," someone said behind me, "you know what that's for, right?" I stepped into the empty demo ring, wedged between 2 tankers. No ceremony, no speech, just squared my stance, inhaled once, then went to work. I executed a vertical breach drill, simulation of a victim behind a collapsed door, swing, plant, pivot. 6 seconds in, the axe split the plywood barrier. 10 seconds later, I had the simulated victim hauled clear and stabilized in a flawless maneuver, full weight lift and carry, just like the certification protocol. Silence, not a breath, not a word. I set the axe down quietly, wiped my hands, and walked past the dumbstruck group. Behind me, someone whispered, "She just beat Mason's time record." I didn't look back, but I felt it. The weight of his silence, the one man who should have known who I was. Chief Robert Vale didn't say a thing. He just stared at me like I was a ghost he couldn't place. I didn't give him the chance to catch up. I just kept walking. The back of my shirt damp with sweat, my hands steady. Name Samantha Vale, 36 years old, wildfire strategist, rescue lead, desert ghost, if you believe the stories, and apparently still invisible to my own father. When I was 11, I asked my dad if I could come with him to a local wildfire drill. He didn't even look up from his paperwork. "That's not for girls," he muttered. "Daniel's going." That was pretty much how it went in our house. Daniel got the fire chief hat for his 10th birthday. I got a pink jump rope I never asked for. He had shelves of books on fire, science and gear he didn't even know how to use yet. I borrowed his manuals at night when everyone was asleep and read them under a flashlight. My name is Samantha Vale, and in the Vale household, I was wallpaper. Our mother, Rachel, was the only one who ever really looked at me. She'd bring home secondhand books from the local library bin, books on wilderness survival, knot tying, CPR. When I was 10, she gave me a climbing harness and said, "Just because they don't see you doesn't mean you're not strong." She died the following year, a sudden heart aneurysm. I came home from school to find the kitchen quiet and Dad standing stiff by the back door, his face pale, not crying. He didn't explain it. Daniel hugged me once, then ran upstairs. After that, it was just silence, as if she'd taken the only warmth in the house with her. Daniel became the future of firefighting, like some prophecy carved into stone. Dad took him to every seminar, signed him up for junior fire cadet programs. There were newspaper clippings with Daniel's name under bold letters like Young Hero and Son of Legend. I wasn't even in the background of the photos, so I trained alone. I did pull-ups on the garage beam until my palms bled, timed myself running uphill with a backpack full of sand, taught myself knots, water rescue, wildfire mapping, all from books, online guides, field manuals I could barely afford. When I turned 17, I applied to the National Emergency Response Academy. I didn't tell anyone. I stole a copy of our utility bill from the drawer to prove residency and mailed my application in a plain envelope. I got in, top 5% of all applicants. The acceptance packet came with a formal scholarship letter and a silver pin I still keep tucked inside my old rucksack. I left home the day after graduation. Didn't tell anyone, didn't write a note. They never noticed I was gone. They didn't even ask. That was the last time I saw the inside of that house. As the train pulled away, I stared out the window and made a promise to myself. I would outwork every shadow they put me in. I would climb every mountain they said I didn't belong on. And I would do it without their applause. I learned early that glory belonged to the loud, so I went the other way. I didn't sign up for press briefings, I didn't chase medals. I became the kind of name only found on the last page of after-action reports, if it showed up at all. They called me S. Vale in the system. Most folks assumed I was a guy. In the field, I wore a bandana under my helmet and kept my voice low on the comms. What mattered was speed, accuracy, survival, not who you were. The nickname Ash Hawk started as a joke. Some rookie in New Mexico said I circled smoke columns like I had wings. Then we pulled a 9-person evac in under 7 minutes, while a canyon ridge collapsed behind us, and suddenly the name stuck, Ash Hawk. Fast, precise, unpredictable? I didn't mind it. Better that than being known for the name I stopped answering to. There were places we went where others refused, a granite cliffside above a lumber campfire, a wind-blasted canyon in Arizona, where a smoke column blew sideways like a goddamn wall. We were sent in to extract a team that got pinned too deep. Captain Weller took a hit from falling debris. I dragged him out through black timber, while the blaze chewed up everything behind us. I remember his voice, cracking through the mask. "You don't have to do this. Get out." I just gritted my teeth and hauled harder. They gave him a medal. I didn't attend the ceremony. I was already gearing up for a fuel break in Oregon. I liked being no one. I liked the freedom in it. I moved between units, stayed 2 steps ahead of paperwork, changed call signs when I had to. If someone asked too many questions, I moved on. But sometimes, late at night, when the radio was quiet and the air outside the tent smelled like smoke and pine, I'd think about calling him. Just once. Not for approval, not anymore. Just to say, I made it. I'm still here. But that fantasy always ended the same. Me saying Dad, and him pausing a little too long before answering. So I never dialed. Instead, I filled my pack with ropes, flares, maps, memorized fire line shifts before dawn. Became the person you called when the fire didn't behave. The person who could smell danger before the drones picked it up. My name wasn't on billboards, but people whispered. In quiet tents and hotshot briefings, they'd say, "If Ash Hawk's on it, we might have a shot." That was enough. For a while, at least. But part of me, some small leftover thread, still wondered if he'd ever say my name. Just once. Not as a mistake, not as a footnote. Just as his daughter. I wasn't on the guest list, but I showed up anyway. It was a fire service ceremony in Sacramento. Formal, starched, the kind of thing where medals clinked when people walked. They called it a legacy summit, honoring multi-generational fire families. Chief Robert Vale was the keynote speaker. My father. Of course he was. I came alone, in civilian clothes. No rank, no nameplate. Just a dark blouse and a seat near the back. The room was filled with brass and buzz. State directors, battalion chiefs. Men in suits talking about lineage like it was blood-borne. I kept my head down as my father stepped onto the stage. He looked older but not smaller, still straight-backed, still commanding. He stood behind the podium with practiced ease, his voice even and polished. "Firefighting isn't a job," he began. "It's a legacy. It's something we pass down, from fathers to sons." I stiffened. The phrase hit like a slap. Maybe it was habit, maybe he didn't think. But I knew better. He went on, talking about his own father, then shifted to Daniel. "My son, Captain Daniel Vale, is the next generation of that legacy. He represents everything we hope to build in this profession." The room applauded. He smiled. "I have one child, and I couldn't be prouder." My breath caught. I felt it like a punch to the ribs. One child. I stared straight ahead, heart thudding, eyes dry. He didn't just forget me, he erased me. I sat through the rest of the speech without blinking. I didn't move when the crowd rose for a standing ovation. I didn't flinch when people clapped his back and shook his hand. I just stood quietly, waited for the aisle to clear, and walked out into the dusk without a word. That night, back in my hotel room, I found the article already live online. Firefighting Dynasty. Chief Robert Vale and son lead the next era. There was a photo of the two of them on stage, smiling, flanked by state officials. No mention of me, not even a footnote. It wasn't ignorance anymore, it was intention. He knew who I was, he knew what I'd done, and he chose to pretend I didn't exist. I closed the article, sat still for a long time. Then I opened a drawer, pulled out my field journal, and wrote one sentence at the top of a fresh page. No more silence. I had protected his reputation for years. Bit my tongue. Hid behind initials and blurred team photos. That ended now. He'd built a legacy on the backs of others, on mine most of all. If he wanted to forget me, he was about to learn just how loud a ghost could get. I didn't sleep much after that night in Sacramento. Instead, I spread everything I had across the floor of my one-room cabin near Divide, Colorado, mission reports, GPS logs, drone footage, body cam stills. There were hand-signed commendations from regional supervisors, evac maps marked with red grease pencil, and a thumb drive of radio logs that still carried my voice under the call sign, Ash Hawk. I cataloged it all. I made a timeline. Fires, dates, operations, survivors, dozens of cases, many of them written up by other people but executed by me. You wouldn't find my name at the top. That was the point. I'd always worked behind the curtain. Now I had to pull it back. I filled 3 binders. Then I added the survivor statements, people I'd pulled from ravines, parents I'd guided down rock faces with smoke curling over their heads. They'd written to their captains, their stations, even to the governor's office. To whoever she was, one woman had scrawled, "Please thank her for dragging my husband and our daughter through the ash field. She's the reason we're alive." I filed everything under my full name, Samantha Vale. Then I submitted it to the National Valor Board. The application included a request for formal recognition of field leadership, supported by every shred of data I had. I attached notarized witness affidavits. I even highlighted the call sign transitions. It was tight, undeniable. 3 weeks later, I got a polite reply. Denied. No reason given, just a form letter. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then I looked again. I noticed something. The email footer, a name I hadn't expected to see. Chair of the awards committee, Chief Robert Vale. I laughed, a short, cold sound that didn't feel like me. He'd found a way to block me again. But this time, I didn't disappear. Instead, I filed an appeal through the Federal Emergency Services Oversight Committee, a path most people didn't bother with because it bypassed the internal chain. But I'd learned a long time ago, when the system is built to erase you, you don't ask for the front door. You find the side entrance. The appeal package was twice as thick. I added supplemental drone footage, including thermal flyovers I designed myself. I referenced fire line equations from my own models, ones now used by 3 state agencies. And I sent a personal letter, not to the board, but to Senator Evelyn Cross. She was a former smoke jumper. She knew what it meant to lead in silence. 2 weeks after my appeal hit her desk, she called me. "I remember your work," she said. "Ash Hawk. You were the one in the rimfire collapse. The kid who mapped the path out when GPS failed." I didn't correct her. I wasn't a kid anymore. "I'm in," she said. And just like that, the tide shifted. A quiet investigation into internal board decisions began. Emails were reviewed, connections traced. My father's name came up more than once in cases where female nominees' files had gone missing or stalled. I never saw the report. But I didn't need to. For the first time, someone was finally listening. And this time, I wasn't letting anyone shut the door. I didn't know who'd put my name forward. The invitation came in an official envelope with gold embossed lettering. National Wildfire Graduation Ceremony. Keynote speaker invitation, Samantha Vale. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. They asked me to speak on leadership and endurance. They had no idea how ironic that was. I almost declined. Almost. But then I thought of the silence I'd carried for years. Thought of the ones who fought just as hard and were forgotten faster. So I said yes. The ceremony was held at a massive auditorium in Denver, all clean lines and red banners, the kind of place where careers were launched with applause and a framed certificate. I wore my formal dress uniform, black with silver bars and the insignia for Wildland Command on my sleeve. No one had seen me in it, not even my team. When I stepped backstage, I glanced through the curtain. Rows of chairs filled with cadets in fresh uniforms, families with cameras, high-ranking officials with polished pins, and right there, second row, center aisle, Chief Robert Vale, and beside him, my brother Daniel. I froze for a moment. I hadn't expected them. I almost turned around. But then the announcer's voice rang out over the speakers. "And now, please welcome our keynote speaker, one of the most experienced wildfire tacticians in the field today, Lieutenant Commander Samantha Vale. The entire hall went still. Every head turned. I walked out, heels clicking against the stage floor, and took the podium. I looked straight ahead, not at them. Not yet. Thank you, I said. Most of you don't know me. That's by design. I've spent the last 15 years behind smoke and silence. I went by S. Vale. Some of you may have seen that name in mission logs or comms reports. You may have whispered the nickname Ash Hawk without ever knowing who she was. A ripple moved through the crowd. I didn't come from the kind of legacy most of you were taught to admire. I wasn't the chosen child. I wasn't given gear or guidance or second chances. I had to build everything I am from the outside. Now I look down, at my father, at Daniel. My father's face was pale. Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. My name is Samantha Vale, I said clearly. I have led rescue operations in 19 major wildfires across 5 states. I have lost friends and saved strangers. I've watched fire behave like a living thing and fought it anyway. Not because anyone told me I belonged, but because I knew I did. No one made a sound. I'm here today because too many women like me weren't invited to speak. We were told to be grateful for scraps, to work harder, and say less. Well, I worked harder, and I'm done being quiet. I turned to the line of cadets waiting on stage, holding awards. One girl, tall brown hair in a tight bun, a burn scar just visible along her jaw, stood straighter as I approached. This year's Excellence in Field Readiness Award, I said, goes to Cadet Nora Jimenez. I handed her the medal. Her eyes brimmed with tears. The crowd erupted in applause. I turned back to the audience. Somewhere in the clapping, I caught one last look at my father. He didn't blink, didn't move, just sat there like a statue watching history rewrite itself in front of him. And for once, I didn't care. I wasn't looking for his approval. I had already claimed something better. My name, my truth, my place. They pinned the medal to my chest in front of the nation. National broadcast, live stream, high-definition cameras catching every angle. The announcer's voice was steady as she read the citation. For exceptional leadership and valor under extreme wildfire conditions. For saving lives at great personal risk. For breaking barriers quietly and rewriting the standards through action. Lieutenant Commander Samantha Vale, recipient of the National Valor Medal. The applause was loud, overwhelming. Somewhere in the front row, I spotted Senator Cross. She gave me a single firm nod. I stood tall, hands steady at my sides. They handed me the plaque, posed for the photo, and escorted me off stage as reporters started shouting questions. Most were respectful. Some were not. Commander Vale, how do you respond to claims this was a political gesture? Do you think you earned this without using your gender as leverage? Is this part of the recent push for inclusivity optics in federal recognition? I kept my expression neutral. One reporter, a woman with short gray hair and a badge clipped to her blazer, caught my eye and asked gently, "Do you believe the recognition came too late?" I looked right at her. "No," I said. "It came when it needed to." Behind the curtain, someone handed me a bottle of water. I sat for a moment in the quiet, listening to the noise fade behind me. The medal felt heavy, not because of its weight, but because of what it meant. Every missed acknowledgement, every command briefing where I stood in the shadows, every name they forgot to list. The next day, the headlines were mixed. A historic win for women in fire service. Ash Hawk steps into the light. Fire Commander's Medal. Sparks controversy among traditional leadership. And of course, nepotism, feminism, or just PR. I didn't reply to any of it. Let them spin their narratives. I had mine. The real ripple came a week later, when the Emergency Services Oversight Board released a quiet update. Chief Robert Vale would be stepping down from the National Valor Committee due to procedural irregularities. No interviews, no statements, just an internal review and a closed-door demotion that leaked just enough to matter. I saw the news on a sidebar while drinking coffee at a roadside diner. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat. I just folded the screen closed and walked out into the morning sun. I knew there would be more talk. Some would think I came for revenge. Some would say I exposed him for attention. I didn't care, because I'd also seen the other messages. The young woman from Oregon who emailed me saying she reapplied to Wildfire Command after reading my speech. A retired crew medic who said, "I served 20 years and never got credit until now. Thank you for opening the door." Those were the voices I carried forward. Let the critics scream into their microphones. I had already done the hardest thing. I'd stepped out of the shadows and into the fire, and I stood there, not to burn, but to light the path. He showed up unannounced just after dusk, while I was organizing equipment logs on base. "Got a minute?" Daniel asked from the doorway. He looked tired, uniform rumpled, face drawn, like he hadn't slept right in days. I didn't say anything, just gestured toward the spare chair in the corner. He didn't sit. Instead, he stood in the middle of the room, arms crossed like he was bracing for impact. "You really had to do it like that?" he said. The speech, the medal, dragging Dad through the mud. I leaned back in my chair, kept my voice steady. "Dragging him through the mud, or just telling the truth?" He scoffed. "You went too far, Sam. He's been through enough." I set the file down. "So have I." Daniel shook his head, almost laughing. "You always had a chip on your shoulder, ever since we were kids." "Yeah," I said, probably because no one noticed I was even in the damn room. He flinched, just a little. "He made his choices, Daniel." I didn't lie about anything. I didn't hide anyone's records. I didn't pretend my sister didn't exist. Daniel looked down at his boots. "I didn't know it was that bad." "You didn't want to know," I replied. "You liked being the golden one. It made things simple. He gave you the spotlight, and you stood there like you earned it alone." Silence stretched between us. He finally looked up. "I believed him when he said you walked away, that you weren't cut out for it." I shrugged. "You believed what was easy. That's on you." He hesitated, then asked, "Is there any part of you that regrets how public it got?" "No," I said. "Not for 1 second. I didn't do it to shame him. I did it so people like me wouldn't stay invisible." He nodded slowly. "Guess I never really stood with you, did I?" I looked at him, really looked at him. "No, you were always standing in front of me, not beside me." He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something else, but nothing came out. He just gave a small nod and turned toward the door. I didn't stop him. When he left, the room felt heavier for a moment, and then lighter. Some rifts don't get repaired. Some aren't meant to. I'd waited my whole life for one of them to see me. Turns out I never needed them to. I retired quietly. No parade, no speeches, no interviews. Just a short email to my team, a cleared locker, and one last sunrise briefing, where I passed the clipboard to someone younger and walked out the side door. I didn't want a legacy with trumpets. I wanted something real. I bought land in the mountains of Colorado, an old lodge tucked into a ridge above Salida, with wide decks and fire-scarred pine trees. It had been a training retreat in the 70s, then abandoned. The roof leaked. The pipes screamed. I loved it instantly. 6 months later, the Vail Center for Women in Fire Services opened its doors. It wasn't flashy. We didn't advertise. But word spread fast. We offered tactical retraining, mental health support, peer-led debriefing groups, and a place to just breathe. No ranks, no uniforms, no egos. Most of the women who came through our doors didn't look like warriors. They looked tired, worn, like they'd held up the world for too long and had forgotten how to put it down. They carried stories no one else wanted to hear. Stories like mine. Some stayed a week, some stayed months. Some came back every year like clockwork, just to hike and sit by the fire and remember who they were before the silence swallowed them. I taught drills again, but differently this time. Slower. Gentler. Not everything had to be battle hard. Sometimes healing came from holding space instead of holding command. One day, a young firefighter asked me during a break, "Do you hate him, your dad?" I stirred my coffee. The question didn't sting the way it used to. "No," I said, "I don't hate him. But after everything he did, I'm not doing this for him," I said. "Forgiveness isn't for the people who hurt you. It's for the version of yourself that carried the wound too long." She blinked at that, then nodded slowly. I left the question there. Sometimes peace wasn't loud. Sometimes it was planting your feet on ground. You built yourself in saying, "This is enough." I hung no pictures of my medal, no articles, just one frame photo in the main hallway. An old wildfire unit at sunset, smoke curling behind them, faces tired but proud. No names, just the caption, "Still here." The days ran quiet in the mountains. In the mornings, I walked the ridgelines. At night, I listened to stories echo against the pine. No crowds, no stage, just purpose. And this time, I didn't need anyone else's approval to feel it. It was late autumn, and the trees around the center burned gold. The air had that sharp, dry bite that always came before snow. I stood outside the main hall, sipping from a chipped mug, when a new trainee wandered over. Barely 20, probably fresh from her first season on the line. She kicked at the gravel a little, then looked up. Can I ask you something? I nodded. Sure. She hesitated. Why didn't you go after them? Your dad? The people who tried to erase you? You had the platform. You could have taken them down. I smiled gently, not because the question was wrong, but because I had asked it myself, so many times. I thought about it, I said. I dreamed about it even, but revenge is heavy. It keeps you tied to the people who hurt you. At some point, I realized winning wasn't about proving anything to them. She frowned. Then what is it about? Letting go, I said. Building something stronger, something they don't get to touch. We stood there in silence for a minute. The wind stirred the tall grass near the old fire tower. Somewhere inside, someone was laughing. Real, loose laughter. I didn't need to know who it was to feel the warmth of it. I guess I always thought victory meant standing over the people who wronged you, she said. Sometimes it does, I said. But sometimes it means walking away while they're still shouting and realizing they don't matter anymore. She nodded slowly. Then she turned and walked back inside, her shoulders a little lighter. When she was gone, I stepped into the center hall and crossed to the glass case we'd installed last spring. It wasn't big. No lights, no velvet ropes, just one clean square box near the front entrance. Inside it was my old fire axe, the same one from that desert training compound years ago. I'd polished the handle, cleaned the head, but left the dings and wear. Below it sat a small plaque with 5 words etched in plain steel: carried with honor, swung with truth. I rested my fingers on the glass. Then I walked outside again, down the back trail that cut through the trees. At the clearing near the overlook, I sat on the old bench someone had carved from fallen timber. The sun was low now, spreading quiet gold across the peaks. I closed my eyes, exhaled slowly. You were always enough, I whispered. Not to anyone else, not to a crowd or a legacy, to the girl who once trained in silence, who walked away without looking back, who chose her own name. The wind picked up, cool and clean, and then I stood, tucked my hands in my coat, and walked into the fading light. Finally, fully free.